Hey everybody, welcome to How Does It Work? The place where we talk about how different its work. My name is Jesse and today we're going to be talking about GPS or Global Positioning System, the world's first fully integrated global navigation satellite system. And the idea for it actually came from the first satellite, Sputnik. Back in 1957, researchers were listening to Sputnik and they realized it sounded kind of similar to a car driving past with its horn on. It sounded different when it was coming towards them than it did when it was going away from them. They realized that they could use that information to figure out exactly where in space Sputnik was. And the more they thought about it, the more they thought, if we can figure out where Sputnik is in space, maybe we can figure out where we are on Earth. This system was developed by the US Navy, and they used it primarily to figure out where their submarines were so that they could launch their missiles accurately. Now, the system that they developed could only tell where the submarines were about once an hour. Unfortunately, this was during the Cold War, so they were worried that they would need to use their submarines more frequently than that. So they began to develop the global positioning system that would allow them to know where their submarines were at any time. By 1993, they had developed 24 satellites in outer space. This allowed them to have satellites all around the world. Now, how did GPS work? They needed 4 different satellites. These satellites could pretty much just tell what time it was. That's their main job. What happens is you ask them what time it is, and then they tell you what time it is. Now, because it's in outer space, it takes a while for that signal to get there and back. Not a long while, usually only less than 0.05 seconds, but enough for machines to tell the difference. And we use that difference in time to figure out exactly where we are. With 3 different signals, the point where those all intersect is the point that we're at. The reason that we need 4 satellites is because we also need to tell what our altitude is. Now, if you're on the ocean, you don't need the 4th satellite. You can just say, I'm at sea level. But if you're not, you kind of need the 4th. Now, the reason that I said that a GPS was the world's first fully integrated global navigation satellite system is because there's actually other countries that are working on their own satellite systems. A lot of people didn't really like that the United States could just decide that GPS didn't work for you if they didn't like you. So Russia, the European Union, China, Japan, and India are all developing their own satellite systems. They're all at different states of implementation. The Russian GLONASS system and the European Union Galileo system are both pretty much there. We can actually use them to make our systems more accurate as civilians. It's pretty nice. Now, some applications of GPS are obviously for the military. They keep track of everything that they need to keep track of. But researchers also use them to tag animals. Before GPS, they would have to tag the animals and then hope that they found them later. Now they can watch their path as they travel. We use them for driving or directions every day. I use it for fitness. My watch has GPS, my phone has GPS, my bike has GPS, my car has GPS, everything has GPS now. One of the more interesting applications for GPS actually uses that time function. Remember, we could ask the satellite what time it was, and it was more than happy to tell us? Well, actually, financial institutions use that. They all use the GPS so that they can find out exactly what time it is and all be on the same time schedule. That way, if you want to transfer something at exactly 5 o'clock in Utah time, the whole world can transfer that money. Now, there are some weaknesses to GPS. Like I said, it's only really telling you what time it is and where the satellite is, so it's not a lot of information, and the signal doesn't have to be very strong. But that means we cannot use GPS indoors very well. If you open your Google Maps right now, you'll probably see the little dot that is you jumping around if you're inside. That's because it doesn't really know where you are. Even if you're outside and you zoom in, you'll see that there's a circle around the dot that is supposed to be you. And that's because Google Maps is telling you, we only know that you're approximately in this location. It's usually about 16 feet for cell phones. Now, there's definitely ways that we can make it more accurate. Like I said, that GLONASS system and Galileo system allow us to have more access to more satellites. So we can acquire a connection faster and a better connection because there's more satellites telling us what time it is. But there's also a bunch of GPS integration called augmented systems. There's one especially called differential GPS that allows the Coast Guard with antennas along the coast to tell within 1 inch where the signal is coming from. 1 inch, that's crazy when our cell phones are 16 feet. There's also a really cool one called LAAS, or Local Area Augmented System. And that's actually what airplanes use to do their autopilot systems when they're landing. So individual airports can have this system, and even on the foggiest days, the pilots can just hit the button and that system will allow the plane to land itself. It makes pilots seem a little bit less impressive, but I'm sure their job's still hard. Finally, the one that affects us the most is the assisted GPS. That's actually what's used in our cell phones. So the way that that works is for GPS to start up, it needs to know where the satellites are and kind of how they're moving. So a little bit more information than just the time. Unfortunately, like I said, that signal is pretty weak. It can't send very much information. So your cell phone will actually use its data connection to ask your cell phone provider where the satellites are, kind of what they're doing, so that it can get that information way faster. It means that instead of taking like 1 to 3 minutes to connect to GPS, we can usually do it in a couple seconds. It's a way better system. Now, as far as where this system is going in the future, GPS and those other systems used by other countries are always being developed. They're trying to make them more and more accurate, better precision, and faster to use. But one of the things that I guess is a sister system to GPS is one that Amazon just announced, the Amazon Sidewalk program. Now, it's not going to use satellites to tell where you are. Instead, it's going to use triangulation of a different method. So your little Amazon Echo, instead of just doing its job that it's been doing until now, will be sending out a signal that can go approximately half a mile, and it will communicate with any other devices that are similar, making a huge network, kind of like our satellites in outer space, but here on Earth. It's going to use that same 3 or 4 system method to figure out exactly where your devices are. So if you drop your phone on the lawn and you have your Amazon Echo and your Ring camera and your Ring doorbell all hooked up to this system, it'll be able to use those 3 and triangulate exactly where your phone is. Now, I guess unless you're going to walk around outside with your laptop, that probably won't help you because you won't have your phone to use the screen, but I'm sure you can use somebody else's phone. It's also going to work with tile devices, so if you have one of those on your keys, it'll make it a lot easier to find your keys. Might be really good if you drop them in the snow. So, to give you a little bit more experience with GPS, although I'm sure you've had a lot until now, down in the description below, there's actually a set of numbers. If you open up your Google Maps again and throw that in there, it's going to take you to a location on campus. I hid some little surprises around there, and if you can find them, you can keep them. Actually, in that same spot, there's something called a geocache. It's a game that people play with GPS, kind of like a modern day treasure hunt. So if you find that, sign the book, say that you were there. Hope everybody has a good day, and until next time.